Hello, today I will be unboxing the 2021 Challenger decks, as well as providing a few basic upgrades that I think could make the decks a little bit better. But after looking at the deck lists, I think the only two that are like really good out of the box, and maybe with minor upgrades, are the Rogues and the Mono Red. But let's see what we can get in these. Oh, so we get a Gem Razor. The boxes, I noticed, they're a little bit different than the previous Challenger decks. So I'll start off with Mono Green. So I think Mono Green, I'll start off with it first, since it's probably the worst in terms of how much it costs to upgrade this deck, because it's missing a lot of important cards. So, 2-turn Timber Symbiosis. I'm guessing these are the mythics. Oh, and 1 Garruk Unleashed. It's not too bad. Stone Cold Serpent. 2 Scavenging Ooze. Ram through, and there should be, yeah, as well as Primal Might, pretty good removal. And I thought I would share some upgrades that I might make to the deck. Obviously, if I were to get one of these decks and go play it in paper, I would probably pick up either Rogues or Mono Red, but if you really want to play Mono Green, some alternative cards could be probably Questing Beast. I was kind of disappointed they didn't put at least one of these. It's pretty good. Probably one of the best 4-drops for green. There's Inscription of Abundance. I thought would be a card that's definitely playable. It can do a lot of different things. It can put counters on your creatures. It can make you fight another creature. Oh, and you can also gain some life. So I think this is kind of like a versatile card that could be played, and it's pretty cheap, unlike some of the other ones I'm going to show. Gilded Goose would probably be a decent 1-drop. I think what they put in here was, they put in that, like, that 2-drop that, I forget what it's called. Oh, it might be in the sideboard. Then Old Growth Troll, that's in Kaldheim. This would definitely be an include. Probably a pretty good 3-drop. It's up there with Lovestruck Beast and Yorvo. And of course, yeah, these two. The Great Henge. This is what makes this deck go from like actually playable to kind of weak. And they decided, I guess, not to put these in because they're worth like I think $50 each. So yeah, I wouldn't pick up this deck unless you're prepared to spend some big money on some important upgrades. And then a few creatures that you could add would be an Elder Gargaroth as a pretty solid 5-drop. There's also the Mammoth in Kaldheim. And maybe a Kogla the Titan Ape, as it can take out artifacts and our enchantments and then also fights a creature. And let's take a look at the sideboard. I actually don't think I looked at the list of this before I opened it. So yeah, Kalani Ambush. Yeah, that would I would definitely replace that with like an Inscription of Abundance or something. Oh, this isn't bad. Chainweb Arachneer for Rogues. Because you definitely need stuff that has Escape that can let you fight off Rogues. Turn to Nature. Another Snakeskin Veil. Oh, for the Mirror, I'm guessing. And this would also be for Rogues. And some Beast and Insect tokens. I think also with this deck, the value isn't the best. I think probably one of the more valuable cards are the Stonecoil Serpents. I think they're like $4 or $5. But let's start with the Dimir Rogues deck. And yeah, this is probably my favorite one. And if I were just to get one of these decks, this would be the one I would get. A lot of people also dislike this deck on Arena. So we get Rankle here. And yep, there's Rankle. Nice to get one of these. These are actually worth a decent amount. And 4 Thieves' Guild, Vantress Gargoyle. This card probably isn't played all that much anymore. Nighthawk Scavenger is a decent one. A couple of Zareth. Temple of Deceits, and let's see, yeah, Dismal Backwater. I think an obvious upgrade is a Pathways. And some more rogues. Yeah, these are probably pretty important ones. Drown for the counter, and then some versatile removal. I actually like that they included 2 of each, because sometimes, like, I know with Crawling Barrens, for example, only Eliminate really ends up getting it. And let's look at the sideboard they included. So some negates. Into the Story. Maybe there should be a few more of these. Pestilent Haze, I'm guessing, yeah, for other aggro decks. Cling to Dust is important because this deck can really struggle against any deck that plays Kroxa. Some Duress. And Fairy Rogues, even though I don't think you can create tokens in this deck. This would be used for like Bitter Blossom. So I actually think this deck is pretty good. I think for upgrades, one alternative could just be to put in Luris, and then you would have to take out some of these bigger, as well as Nighthawk Scavenger, I think. Some of the bigger three drop and up. I think most like competitive rogue decks right now, they're playing Luris. So, but if you want to have more fun, I think playing cards like Rankle and Zareth's, I think it's more fun that way. And if you do decide to keep in Zareth and Rankle, you could probably put in a Brazen Borrower, remove some of the other weaker rogues. Which one would, yeah, like something like a Black Bloom Rogue. I almost never seen this played anywhere. Yeah, it's mostly just a land, so. And of course, the main upgrade that you would always need to get would be the Pathways, which are actually pretty cheap right now because nobody's playing paper. I'm honestly not sure if I'll get to play these decks in paper because where I'm at, most places aren't open yet. So next deck, let's go with the Azorius Control. This deck, what's good about this deck is it's probably the most value-loaded deck since it has, I think, like multiple cards over $10. But if you want to make it competitive, it needs a lot of upgrades. So we get a Dream Trawler little. So you get one Emerius Call and then 2 Skyclave Clerics. Of course, the Emerius Call is much better. It's one of the Bolt lands. A couple of Dream Trawlers. Archons of Sun Grace as well. So yeah, this is more of like a creature based. Yeah, I think if you were to make a blue-white control deck, you would probably make it more focused on Yorion. So, oh, 2 Shatter the Sky and 1 Doomscar. I think this should probably be all, if you want to upgrade this, you would probably make all 3 of these Doomscar. Shark Typhoon, nice $10 card. 3 Elspeth, Conquer's Death. Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't include Yorion. I guess it's because they want to make them all 60 cards. Plus sideboard. 4 Temple of Enlightenment. And some counters. Yeah, this is much better than Neutralize in my opinion. It's pretty rare you're going to cycle your counters. You would maybe do it if you were desperate to against some kind of aggro deck, and by then you probably lost already. Thirst for Meaning, negate. And 2 Behold the Multiverse. I really like this card. It's a pretty good card advantage, since you can a lot of the times just foretell it until you really need it, and it's only 2. And 4 Birth, 4 Omen, and a couple Vanishing Light, and 2 Glass Casket. And the best part of this deck is that they give you Skyclave Apparitions. I think this is, like right now it's over $11, and it's the most expensive rare in Zendikar Rising. So, Confounding Conundrum. This card was only really relevant when ramp decks were played a lot, when there was Uro, Omnath. But Omnath and Uro are banned, and so this card, it really only works against Cultivate in the meta these days. Couple Mystical Disputes, which are good against rogues. Essence Scatter. Oh, Glass Casket. Yeah, you definitely need 4 of these against most aggro decks. And they put another Skyclave at the bottom, in the back there. As well as some Pegasus tokens. And if you wanted to upgrade this deck, I think some pulled aside a few decent options. So one card you could really use would be maybe Crawling Barrens. It's a pretty good control finisher, and there are certain decks that just really have no way to beat this card. You need something like Eliminate, because Heartless Act won't work since you'll get it too big enough that you can just remove 3 count. They can only remove 3 counters. Obviously the Pathways. What's nice about the Pathways is they're pretty cheap right now since nobody plays Paper. Or Paper Standard, I should say. And yeah, this is the main card you want, but then you would have to bump up your deck to 80, but it's worth it because there's just, even in the deck they give you with Elspeth's Conquer's Death and Omen of the Sea, Birth of Melatus, all these cards are, you can boost their value with Yorion, so I feel like it's worth playing. Then a couple artifacts that could be played would be Mazemind Tome and Solemn Simulacrum. I think I like this, and any deck that plays like Dream Trawler, I always tried to play this because Dream Trawler is a 6-drop that it can be, sometimes it can just be too slow, and especially against aggro decks, you might not be able to get it out in time to stop the bleeding. But this guy can basically ramp you, put a body on the board, and then draw you a card. So I really like him. And Mazemind Tome is also one of my favorite cards, especially with Yorion, since he's just so much value. And then if you blink it, it resets. And one kind of alternative card you could maybe add would be a Realm Cloak Giant. I really like this card. Almost nobody plays it, but it can be a pretty nice finisher because it can sweep the board. It sweeps almost anything relevant that's not Bone Crusher Giant. So it's I don't know, but I guess Doomscar is probably better. Maybe you could put one of these in if you run Yorion. And for the final deck, Yeah, every time they release these challenger decks, mono red is like always the complete deck because it has such low requirements. And we get Annex. So, a couple Shatter Skull Smashing. Pretty good, definitely. Played in a lot of decks, it's very versatile. And in mono red, you're attacking, so taking 3 damage isn't a big deal. Unless maybe you're racing another aggro deck. And then Spike Field Hazard. This card I think is kind of weak, it doesn't hit all that much. Maybe you could like play this against like mono white or something that has a lot of 1 toughness creatures. Embercleave, they include this in it. I think the last one had it as well, last year's. Fervent Champion, pretty good. 1-drop, probably the best 1-drop for red. For Kargan Intimidator, this is the one card that I would maybe get rid of the deck for another card because I really don't see this played that much. And Bone Crusher Giant, very good, played in so many formats. 3 Torbran and 2 Castle Embereth. See what the other cards here are. Akum Hellhound. It's kind of a weaker 1-drop compared to Fervent Champion. Rimrock Knight, pretty good for getting a lot of quick damage. And yeah, Annex. Glad they included Annex since this. I think last year's Challenger decks did not include Annex, and Annex is probably one of the more important cards. And then there is Shock and Royal Eruption. I don't really see these played in mono red all that often. There's better options now. So, Relic Robber can be a little bit annoying, but also a card that doesn't see a lot of play. Roiling Vortex. I don't think I've ever seen this played by a mono red player. Yeah, I guess it could actually be like a decent sideboard card. And then Soul Guide Lantern, you definitely need a hate on decks that have graveyard, that take advantage of their graveyard. Red Cap Melee, this is played in a lot of sideboards. Thundering Rebuke, Soulseer. This would probably hit the, what's it called? That 3/1 mono white creature that you have to discard a card to make him indestructible. This would be pretty good against it. And in terms of upgrades, there's some pretty easy upgrades you can make here. So obviously the first would just be adding more Embercleaves, because this card is just so good for mono red, especially on an Annex. It just wins you the game. Then there could be Phoenix of Ash. It's a pretty good sideboard card. It's good against rogues, since you definitely need something. If Rogues is milling you, you definitely want to be able to take advantage of that, and this is a pretty good card. Also, it could prevent them from casting into the story. Then the removal I would put in would be Frostbite, since usually you'll be playing, you'll replace these mountains with snow-covered mountains, and 1 mana deals 3, and this hits a lot, especially in Rogues. And another sideboard card could be Embereth Shieldbreaker for dealing with various artifacts that you might need to deal with. This was much more important though when the decks played Oven, but mono green food isn't played that often. And a final potential card could be a Crone War. This could be a pretty good card to really get the advantage over decks that are like kind of similar to yours, where they're just aggro decks and you might want to erase them or just give you a turn to take one of their important creatures. So I think that's the 4 decks. Yeah, normally I just open stuff for my channel for fun, but I added some upgrades that I would probably make. I think the decks, I don't think they're really all that much better than last year's. Of course, the best were the first year where they had that red deck with, I think, Hazoret. That one was so good. It had Chandra, Hazoret. But they definitely should have put like Great Henge and maybe some other more valuable cards. But I guess that's just how it goes. Alright, thanks for watching, and until next time.